and welcome to Perspective. Tonight we examine two crucial issues. Of course, first, the talks that are deadlocked now in Istanbul between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and what of course has led to now a lack of faith in the Afghan Taliban government. We'll be talking about the future of these talks for Pakistan and Afghanistan and the way forward for both the countries. A little later on, we'll also talk about nuclear testing and how disinformation is being fueled by India from across the border on what Pakistan has always adhered to as far as nuclear safety concerns are concerned. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Anas Mallick from Asia One News from Istanbul. Thank you so much for being with us today. We also have with us Brigadier Retired Haris Nawaz, who's a defense analyst. Thank you so much for joining us, and a little later on we'll also have other guests. Anas, in Istanbul right now, first of all, we know that the talks have been deadlocked. We know that, as the defense minister said, what was cautious optimism before has now resulted in the reinforcement of loss of faith in the Afghan Taliban. How are things in Istanbul at this time?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I think how things in Istanbul, let's start with that. The Afghan Taliban delegation is still here. The media is still talking to the Taliban in a bid to convince them to a seeming deadlock. But the Taliban don't acknowledge the issue at hand. They remain oblivious to it, and that is the reason this is the main issue which has been complicating the situation going forward. The Pakistan departed last night. The entire delegation has said it, but Pakistan has not said no to the offer of negotiations. They said that, and it's not just the delegation saying this. The mediator also said the same thing. The Taliban need to demonstrate sincerity on their part, and that is what the situation is. Situation is like, at least on the ground for now. Going forward, what we're expecting is that there can perhaps...
Anas, is the Afghan Taliban delegation still in Afghanistan?
The Afghan Taliban delegation is still not returned. They're expected to return tomorrow, Mahrukh.
Anas, the delegation you said has not returned to Afghanistan and is still there. Are mediators still talking to them? What is the situation in Istanbul at this time?
The mediators are still indeed talking to the Afghan Taliban in a bid to convince them with regards to the outcome of the talks and to break the deadlock. The Pakistani side has not said no. They've said that they are open to diplomacy, they are open to dialogue, but they would want something concrete to come out. The issue has been acknowledged by the mediators as well. The issue has been put forward by the mediators.
There's a slight distortion, but please bear with me. As far as these talks are concerned, it is reported that one of the mediators has said that the counter draft that the Afghan Taliban delegation came up with, which was completely unexpected, was ridiculous. Is this the reason why there is that reinforcement of lack of faith, lack of sincerity in the Afghan Taliban?
Certainly. So the Afghan Taliban had been demanding quite some absurd things. That's what we understood from the mediators, from people who were very close to the negotiating process. And they said that the demands that were put forward were very different from the previous round of negotiations that were put forward in Doha and in Istanbul. For instance, getting a third party or a third country as a guarantor. That is something that was not... The Afghan Taliban also spoke about some internal matters pertaining to Pakistan, and that again was not something that was expected or that was framed as being absurd and illogical. The reason the Pakistani side opted to head back because on the part of the Afghan side, there was no sincerity shown. Mediators understood that, and that, as I said, even now, the mediators are still talking to the Afghan Taliban in a bid to end this seeming deadlock, but the Taliban remain oblivious to the issue at hand. They are not even acknowledging the issue at hand, and that has further complicated the situation. And rather that...
Anas, how credible do you think this is that, when we look at this counter draft, the fact that it is so out of the purview of reality or so ridiculous as it has been said, is it also an eyewash in your opinion? Is it, in terms of lack of sincerity, lack of will by the Afghan Taliban? Because, we know that what Pakistan delegation had said was practical steps to combat terrorism at this time. We talked about counter-terrorism, we talked about tangible, verifiable, effective measures that were going to curb terrorism from the Afghan soil. And then we come up with this kind of a draft which seems to make no sense at this time. Do you think this was just brought up to stall this, these talks at this time? Because we had said that we want there to be a written document this time.
Well, just to clear, the Taliban have not any draft of their own. They have only responded to the draft proposal of Pakistan. So clearly they remained underprepared, or that was seen as a delay tactic, because that showed how much of seriousness they had, or they attached to these talks.
But as I understand, they haven't given a written document, but they've come out with counter terms which are so flagrant that they have seemed ridiculous to even the mediators. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is correct. But their counter document is basically a measure or a damage control exercise, because had there been a draft on their part, they would have been prepared for it. They were never ready to begin with, and that, as I said, that showed their seriousness, particularly when it came to these talks. The reason the mediators also understood the mood yesterday, when the second day of talks began, it did not begin in direct talks between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban regime, but rather there were indirect talks where the Taliban regime were presented by a draft proposal by the mediators. Why was it done by the mediators? Because they wanted to gauge how sincere and how serious are the Taliban and committed are the Taliban for this process. And of course, the Taliban, being the Taliban, they remained oblivious to it. They did not even acknowledge the issue at hand. The reason this deadlock has continued, it ensues even now. And the reason the mediators are trying really hard to somehow break this deadlock, and the only way it goes on to, there is some sort of a break even, or there is headway, there can possibly be a headway, is that the Taliban would have to give up on their most rigid of the demands. Mahrukh?
As far as the mediators are concerned at this time, you are saying, of course, that they are still in talks with the Afghan Taliban delegation. What is their feeling at this time? Because of course, like you said, there's a sincerity shown by the Pakistani side with these clear, verifiable demands which are saying that, let's make this joint effort to combat terrorism that comes from the Afghan Taliban side. And then there comes these countermeasures that seem flagrant and completely, unacceptable. And they know that they would be unacceptable, it seems, at this point. So what is the overall feeling of the mediators at this time, even as they talk to the Afghan Taliban delegation?
Well, having spoken to people directly involved in the process, they're hoping against hope. One of the negotiators, they think that they have greater leverage over the Taliban. One of the mediators, they think that they have greater leverage over the Taliban. The other mediator thinks that the Taliban are being unreasonable. So there seems to be some sort of hoping against hope, but both the mediators are quite persistent on the fact that there needs to be an end to, or there needs to be no violence or no hostility between the border or at the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan and the Afghan Taliban regime. The reason they're making this exercise, they're trying this exercise, they're doing all what they can. They don't want this to be an exercise in futility. But again, the onus only lies on the Afghan Taliban to ensure that this does not end up being an exercise in futility. Mahrukh?
When we talk about, Anas, just quickly, the defense minister said that our returning empty-handed reinforces a lack of faith in Afghanistan. The situation, God forbid, if it flares up, there are attacks on us from their soil, then we will respond depending on the gravity of the situation. Do you think that the Afghan Taliban delegation is cognizant that, the potential when we respond to what happens from their side? Of course, our stance and our response has always been measured and very targeted, but the loss on their side, the potential for it. Do you think that they are cognizant of it as they sit there coming up with these countermeasures?
I think they're not cognizant of the matter of the issue at hand because largely they remain, as I said, and I do sound like a broken record. They've been oblivious to it. They've been ignorant, and that's something that the mediators have been trying to get it across to them that this ignorant attitude needs to stop. It is not good for regional peace. It is not good for regional stability, and it is not good for two Muslim countries and two neighborly countries, and it's not practical either. But Taliban, being Taliban, as I said, they've been very rigid, they've been oblivious, and they've been ignorant, and that is the reason we're seeing that there has been a breakdown. They've been one of their demands has been that Pakistan has to first look into the Afghan Taliban demands, and then they can consider the Pakistani demand, whereas the Pakistani side has been very persistent that the Pakistani demand has been there not just since yesterday or day before or from the 15th of October, but it's been there since the past 4 to 5 years that the Afghan soil needs to be stopped for using for against Pakistan. But the Afghan side, the Afghan Taliban, they at least at hand, they don't seem to acknowledge the issue. It is quite intertwined. It is quite intermingled within their own societal fabric. And again, until and unless they would want to go on to acknowledge and address this issue, the talks are bound to not succeed as they are currently.
So much, Anas. Thank you for updating us comprehensively. Thank you for your time. I'm going to go to Brigadier Retired Haris Nawaz. Brigadier sir, again, when we look at illusions of grandeur, they don't just exist across the border, on that side when we talk about India, but also as far as Afghan Taliban are concerned. Do you think that they are cognizant of what they stand losing? Should this, and one hopes that it doesn't, and of course Pakistan has tried its best that not to do so, but do you think the potential for this to escalate?
You see, Mahrukh, Pakistan has told them very clearly and loudly during the negotiations that one, of course, we expect and single point agenda that you should not allow your land to be used by any terrorist organization against Pakistan, one. And in case that happens, Pakistan will have to take all punitive measures. And that holds, we can go at the hard state, normal, will be very swift, aggressive, and will take a decisive action. And that is what they've been told. But the problem is they don't listen. And they were asking a funny question that their TTP is Pakistanis and they are responsible for them. We have told them they are in Afghan territory. It is your responsibility. If you can't do anything, just push them towards Pakistan and we'll sort them out. Then let us handle them. But as long as they're in your territory and they're crossing the border and do cross-border terrorism, then you're responsible for it. It's very clear. And then they are very clear about it. What is going to do? What we have done is after the small skirmishes, we captured the 22 posts. We destroyed the tank positions. Then we went for airstrikes. We destroyed their training at the camps. And then we Patkia, Gul Bahadur area, we killed 60, 70 Khwarjis. And we killed the commanders also. They know what we're going to do. For us, the main issue is we are very clear and we have a lot of sympathy with the Afghan people. And their misery is coming very soon because they've suffered a lot in Russian war, American war. They've suffered a lot. And then they are the Muslims and we have the Bosat Pashtuns, intermarriages. If we stop logistics support again, they will have.
Brigadier sir, we also said that, we emphasize that we are ready to open everything the moment you shut down what hurts us. We will not accept a promise written in smoke. Do you think that this exercise was all written in smoke, in your opinion, and it shows a clear lack of sincerity on the part of the Afghan Taliban?
Are thankless people. They have an illegitimate government. They don't have political inclusive government. They don't have ethnic balanced government. They are just minting money and enjoying perks and privileges. They are least pushed about the people of Afghanistan. They have not done improved any law and order situation. They have done any improvement in human rights organization. See what they have done with the women rights, how much their rights have been snatched. They can't go to school, they can't go to the colleges, they can't go to TV, they can't go to any business places. So they are out of the community of nations. In the last 4 years, they have not been able to establish any diplomatic relations with any country of the world, even Indians who are very close to them. Just imagine. So that you can't work like this. You keep getting money from Americans because $9 billion are frozen, and they keep giving you out of that money and you're spending a day to the routine work. And then in Chinese are working minor million, they're giving you dollars. So this is not the way. Pakistan told them very clearly, if there is a cross-border terrorism henceforth, after these negotiations are finished and the delegation return home, we are going to take actions, and we know our capability and capacity. The only thing we worry about is the one people. So it is time for a one people of a thing. Do they want to change, bring change in the government through democratic means, bring the government of their own choice, the government which looks after the one people, and it is politically inclusive government. That's the issue we're having it. That's why they're not worried. They are the contractors. You see, when the Americans were there, they had distributed 60, 70 kilometers.
But Brigadier sir, when we talk about, one of the things that we said was that we would, they should issue a religious decree saying that, the terrorism that comes is not, it's not permitted. And there was, I believe, a denial of this, and they said that, they could just issue a guideline. So this shows that, there's a complete lack of sincerity there, lack of will on the part of the Afghan Taliban, because this is something that is doable on their part. How do you look at this?
100% doable. See, the point is, you have to just kick them out, take actions, destroy the training camps, destroy the atom camp, take a criminal proceeding against their commanders who are doing criminal activity. That's doable. Or you can't do anything, just push them towards Pakistan side. We will sort them out. We will take actions along with the people of KPK and the people of border belt, FATA areas. They are all patriotic people. We're going to sort them with the security forces. But the point is, they're not doing it. They're protecting them. It is not only Fardis, it is people of Hindustan and also Daesh. Lot of these people are there. So that's the problem we're having. That's what I'm saying. Pakistan is very clear. Now we have all the right. We have told the mediators, if they don't sign, they don't negotiate. And still Pakistan, even we go for actions, for any action in Afghanistan, still we should try and include China, Pakistan and Iran. We have to sit down, work out again a strategy, how to convince these stupid Afghan Taliban regime that they must understand how much they will cause damage and loss and miseries to the Afghan people. That is more important.
Brigadier sir, when we talk about, working together, when we talk about Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban coming together to combat terrorism, which was the idea as far as these talks were concerned, ACM, the joint counter mechanism that Pakistan proposed, is a verifiable proof of how far Pakistan wanted to go in trying to ensure that this happens. The denial of this, on the other hand, from the other side, also again reinforces the lack of interest from the Afghan Taliban. So if the other side is not interested and there is lack of will, there is lack of sincerity, then what do you have in terms of military options, in terms of regional security implications of this ceasefire if it's violated? What are they?
Mahrukh, then the option is very clear. We have all the means. We have air strikes, surgical strikes. We can have drone strikes. Number 3, we can have the logistics, we choke them through logistic support. Then, of course, we go stop their, of course, Afghan transit. Then we can stop doing business. Their trade is going to suffer. Their people are going to suffer. Then we will not allow them to come to Pakistan with their students to education. We stop coming, not allow them to come for medical treatment. There are so many things. And if we stop it, it's very difficult to survive. They are, honestly, I feel they are not pushed about.
But Brigadier sir, they don't seem to be, this reality doesn't seem to be permeating as far as the Afghan Taliban are concerned. Is it just a lack of interest in their own people? Or is it just, some illusions of what they believe they can do with nothing on ground and nothing in reality to support these illusions? What is it that this reality is not permeating in the Afghan Taliban? Or is it the nexus with India? What is it in your opinion?
They have illusion that they could push out the Russians, but they don't know what was the reason, who supported the Pakistan and Americans. They are having a false hopes not realizing that if Pakistan, with so much Indian force, air force, ground forces, we can sort them out with our military might and with the with the command of our chief Sipa Salar, then they don't realize what we can do with the Afghan Taliban. They are nothing. That's the problem we are having.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brigadier Saab. Thank you for your time. I'm going to go to Ambassador Jamil Ahmed Khan. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador. You know, I want to really go on to this lack of sincerity, lack of will. You know, what is prompting this illusion, in your opinion, this denial of the reality on ground for the Afghan Taliban? You know, when Pakistan comes to them with an offer of something that is so clearly written down, there is, you know, practical steps to coming down on this terrorism. There is JCM, you know, a combined effort to curb down on this kind of terrorism that comes from their side. And then there is this, you know, counter, completely, you know, unthinkable kind of counter that comes from their side. What is prompting this, in your opinion?
It's basically that cohesion. It's basically that relation. It's basically that comradeship under which they've been fighting for the last so many decades against the USSR and against the NATO forces. And also, they have taken oath for the same leader, which is Abdullah Akhundzada. So much so that the TTP, what letterhead they use, on one side is all TTP leaders, on the other side, all Afghan leaders, Afghan Taliban leaders. So they still have that cohesion. They still have that unanimity in their ideology, unanimity in their operation. So that's the reason which it appears is impeding the will and wish of Afghan Taliban to stop TTP. In fact, they don't want to stop TTP. And there are some traditional reasons and there are some administrative reasons. The traditional reason is that during the time once the current Afghan Taliban, they were fighting, they had taken refuge in the territory of Pakistan, the FATA area. We had the same very TTP members. They had harbored them, they had kept them, they had developed the relations, there were intermarriages. And then now that the TTP has gone that side after the operation, TTP had changed their stance, and now the Taliban are paying them back by giving them the full protection. That's the reality. No, and that's the reason.
But, you know, I'm going to interject, but Ambassador, when we look at diplomatic efforts at play here, this is, of course, we have mediators and, you know, very sound mediators at this time on ground. How, you know, how credible and how tangible, in your opinion, that effort of diplomacy is now, you know, moving on from here, going on from this step forward? And, you know, how fruitful do you think it will be, in your opinion?
Well, it didn't yield any results. It didn't yield, and it didn't yield any fruits, for that matter. Qatar and Turkey, they are one of the best sincere friends to Afghan Taliban, and they're losing them. As a matter of fact, those friends and those mediators, they have accepted what evidence Pakistan has presented to them in terms of TTP strongholds and TTP, from what places they are operating, how they are being looked after, who is sending them the money, and how they are collaborating with Afghan Taliban. The information which is pouring in that the fighters of Afghan Taliban are now started joining TTP. The fact of the matter is that Afghan Taliban, they had given their commitments, they have given their undertaking, and that undertaking is under the international legal framework. That is Doha in 2022, what they signed, and they had clearly stated and they clearly undertaken that they are not going to really allow any terrorist group in their soil. But that's not happened. In fact, all the terrorist groups from Syria, now after the new government was formed, they've started coming back, and there are a reported number of about 27,000 terrorists, various groups, they have come back to Afghanistan. So now it is becoming a problem for even Afghan Taliban. They're becoming the slave of their own circumstances. And as I said, that basically there's an administrative reason, there is a traditional reason. The traditional reason is that Pakhtunwali, that's under which the Pakhtuns are to really give protection to anyone who comes and takes refuge with them. There was
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you for your very valuable input. I know that you've updated us quite, thoroughly as far as where the negotiations stand, and of course, the diplomatic efforts and where one hopes that they can go. I'm going to move on to Syed Muhammad Ali, who's joining us now. As we discuss with him, of course, what is India's disinformation campaign regarding the nuclear program. As far as this disinformation campaign is concerned, how do you look at it, Syed? And as far as it having international credibility is concerned, first of all, do you think that this kind of twisting and turning and the facts that are being twisted have any international credibility in your opinion?
Thank you for having me on your show to discuss an important subject. I think it's not something which is shocking or surprising for Pakistan, because Pakistan has witnessed such attempts to malign and discredit the credibility, the safety, the security, and the responsibility of Pakistan's nuclear program over the last 5 decades. And let me explain why they do it and how they do it. First off, when Pakistan decided that it needs to have a nuclear deterrent for its own national security and sovereignty way back in 1972, I think all those countries which did not want to see Pakistan emerge as a nuclear power tried to dissuade Pakistan by pressurizing Pakistani leadership diplomatically. But when their diplomatic coercion and pressure did not work, and Pakistan decided that it will not yield to any pressure tactics, any strangulation, any sanction regimes, any diplomatic coercion, then they realized that it is not working, and Pakistan, despite all the pressure tactics and sanctions, continued, despite changes in the government structure, towards establishing a credible, a very safe, secure, and foolproof nuclear deterrent. Then, after 1998, Pakistan demonstrated its nuclear capability. Then those countries which did not want Pakistan to have nuclear weapons or nuclear deterrent realized that the pressure has not worked, the coercion has not worked, the sanctions have not worked. So let's start to delegitimize it. Let's try to bring bad name to it so that this can be discredited, because they cannot physically eliminate a practical reality. So then starts another phase in which Pakistan's nuclear program is dubbed through narratives like Islamic bomb, like safety security related allegations that terrorists will take control of it, and there is extremism within the armed forces. So these narratives have been built unsuccessfully over the last 27 years. But thankfully, Pakistan has proven, both through its very astute nuclear diplomacy, but also through a very foolproof and one of the best safety and security and command control system that it has developed, that there is not an iota of reality in these allegations and concern. And Pakistan has, alhamdulillah, emerged as one of the most responsible nuclear powers on the world map, which attracts appreciation from our friends, admiration from the world powers, and commands fear from our adversaries at the same time.
I want to, go to this statement that came from Randhir Jaiswal when he called our nuclear activities. He said clandestine and illegal nuclear activities are in keeping with Pakistan's history, nuclear history, as it said. It is centered around export control violations and blah, blah, blah. When we look at the trajectory of what India's nuclear material thefts, we see a trend that stretches from 1994 to 2008 and then beyond to 2024. We look at, early cases involved in illegal possession, smuggling of uranium. There is often, when we look at nuclear materials in thefts in India, and this moves from 1994 to, like I said, 2024. There's persistent illegal trade or leakage of nuclear radioactive materials. There's also, which is stretching over 3 decades. There have been recurring incidents of radioactive material thefts, smuggling in India, and they have been raising concerns of nuclear safety, of non-proliferation. When they are saying this, they are calling, it is the pot calling the kettle black when they have such a marred history of nuclear theft and smuggling, do they not?
It's not just theft and smuggling, Mahrukh. Let me share with you that the entire history of Indian nuclear program is rife with trying to fool and mislead the world and divert attention from its very irresponsible strategic behavior and very unsafe and insecure command control system by making false allegation and fake propaganda against Pakistan. There are three aspects of Indian strategic behavior, which is not just a source of concern for the international non-proliferation regime, but for the international community, but also for the region and the Indian people themselves, because the safety security concerns are primarily a threat to the Indian people themselves. Because if the fissile material and the radioactive material is not handled, managed, and secured safely, its primary threat is to the peaceful Indian people who are unaware that this radioactive material can pose a health hazard to the scientists, to the military officers, to the engineers, and to the normal Indian people. First off, and you would recall that there have been such
Chart, when we look at this chart, like you said, of course, it reeks of irresponsibility, criminal irresponsibility, one has to say, as far as the Indian side is concerned. And when we look at this chart, it's from 1994, it stretches to 2008 to 2020 to 2018, 2016, then it goes on to 2024. And like you said, there is just flagrant pattern of repeated security breaches here that reek of monumental repercussions, like you said, and of course when we talk about nuclear security breaches, they have of course monumental ramifications for everyone, the neighbors, everyone around the world. So when we talk about this narrative, I want to bring you back to it. Do you think it's because they haven't been able to find anything, and this twisting and turning of statements to come out with this propaganda is just one way of trying to save face? What is behind this, in your opinion?
I think India's strategic character has been consistently aimed at misleading the international community and their own nation. And there are three stages in which India's strategic behavior can be understood. First off, the trying to mislead and fool the international community by using the nuclear technology provided by the Western world, by Canada and the US, for peaceful purposes, which was diverted for the weapon program. So the Nuclear Suppliers Group, which was primarily the London Suppliers Group, was founded for the main purpose of saving the world from such irresponsible and erratic strategic behavior, like fooling the world, which India did in 60s and 70s. And then come the second stage, in which, as you rightly pointed out, there's such a long and elaborate history of poor safety and security record, in which radioactive material has been found in workshops, in common shops, as part of the black market racket, and there have been a nuclear powered submarine having a very poor safety record and facing accidents. And these are so many and long list of poor safety security record, which is unmatched, but perhaps by the rest of the world. And then the third aspect of its very irresponsible strategic behavior is trying to fool the world by a fake nuclear doctrine that we have a no first use doctrine. Whereas their recent posture, their recent higher alert level, their canisterization of their missiles, and increasing their speed and readiness level proves that the claim that they have made in terms of a political commitment of having a no first use doctrine is also inconsistent with the physical and technological reality which they have carried out. So there's a third aspect. And the fourth and most important aspect and most critical aspect for peace and security and stability of this region, Mahrukh, is the fact that Pakistan and India are two nuclear powers. And there have been at least 7 and 8 attempts by India to start a war and attack Pakistan despite the nuclearization of South Asia since 1986 brass tacks. And every time Pakistan has restored peace by foiling Indian attempt to destabilize the region and warning the world. So if you look at it in totality, there are ample evidence and historical facts which proves that India's strategic behavior is not only based on poor safety and security record, misleading the world through false narrative, trying to make false allegations against Pakistan, but also trying to destabilize the region frequently through aggressive designs and aggressive doctrines against primarily Pakistan. So these facts provide ample evidence that the Indian strategic capability and behavior is not just a threat to South Asian stability, but a threat to international peace and security as well.
Right. Thank you so much, Syed Muhammad Ali. On that note, thank you so much. We're running out of time. Of course, we spoke to you about the deadlock as far as Pakistan and Afghan Taliban talks at this time in Turkey, and how things can move forward, whether they can move forward at all, and as the mediators talk to the Afghan Taliban delegation even now. We have no way of knowing where things are headed. A little later on, of course, we also spoke to you how India's nuclear lapses and the risks they pose not just to the region, but to the world, and how far the trajectory of those nuclear lapses, security lapses, have stretched from 1994 to 2024. On that note, thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.